For all my astrology enthusiasts, I'm coming with a special video on the upcoming Venus retrograde. It's a very interesting retrograde. It's going to be very effective, very meaningful. So we need to investigate what this Venus retrograde is all about. Now, very interesting, 2025, the first quarter is all about retrogrades. We started 2025 with a Mars retrograde in the sign of the Crab. Then, soon Venus is going to go retrograde in Aries, and then she's going to move back to Pisces. And also Mercury at the same time is going to go retrograde as well from Aries back into Pisces. So these are all three personal planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. And it's very interesting that we encounter all of these retrogrades in the first quarter of this year. What does that mean? It seems that the cosmos wants us to catch up on all the high intensity frequency changes that is going on, because massive outer planets, which are much further away from us, are also undergoing huge transformations because they're all changing signs. We just had Pluto, right, entering Aquarius and staying there for 20 years. Soon the first other big outer planet, Neptune, is going to move into Aries and is going to stay there approximately 16 years. Then in, a couple of months ahead, we're also going to have Uranus, the last outer planet, also changing into a new sign, Gemini, and that will be approximately 7 years. These outer planets have long orbits, so all of them changing around the same time is a huge change in energy, and we might all feel very overwhelmed because the reality might also be undergoing massive metamorphosis, massive transformation. Things are ending, things are completing, things are never going to be the way they were. Not that that's a bad thing, because some things just don't serve anymore. They're outdated, they're done, and they've maybe not been so good as we've been told. So we are changing times, we are changing reality. And I think these personal planets are preparing us to, like I said, catch up. Because what a retrograde's about is that seemingly for us, from our Earth perspective, they seem to move backwards. Now, no planet does that, by the way. They all move forward. But it's just the way that the orbit seemingly is visible to us in a backward fashion. But this has a huge implication energetically. So because we see it backwards, the energy is backwards as well. So when a personal planet goes retrograde, this energy is now slowed down and is working, looking at the past. It's looking backwards to what was previously going on, older projects you worked upon but didn't finish, or subjects from the past coming back to light to be reviewed, to be looked over, to see what needs to be improved, what areas you need to reflect upon. This can be, people from your past, relationships, family members that you lost contact with, or past friends wanting to, solve things again, or at least clear the air. This can be, like I said, past projects that you want to finish up on. It can also be behavioral patterns that you want to look over. And also sometimes by looking back, we can learn so we can move forward in a more correct fashion. Now, because all three personal planets are going retrograde in the first quarter of this year, let me give you a little brief kind of tip-top what that means. Mars retrograde that is ending February 24th means that we have been going over our goals, our motivations, our desires, what motivates us, so that we can do new goal setting, you know, so that we are more in touch with our heart, that where our heart is in our goals, and that we make new plans to go get it once Mars goes direct. The problem is that because it's only February 24th when Mars goes direct, we have only 1 week of no retrogrades for the coming time, because Venus goes retrograde March 2nd. So only a week between Mars going direct, we're moving into the second retrograde, and that will be Venus. Now, Venus is different to Mars. Mars is a masculine energy where we go out and go get it. So it's an outward energy, right? Venus is the feminine energy, so it's about receiving and allowing. So it's a very different form of energy. Venus represents not just women and the feminine, but also beauty and also relationships, as well as finances, self-worth, love for others, but also love for yourself. A Venus retrograde takes place approximately 40 days, so it means that she will be retrograde until April 13th. Her retrograde will be between 10 degrees of Aries, moving back to 24 degrees of Pisces. And because it's a 40-day retrograde, when she starts March 2nd, interestingly, March 15th, the other personal planet, Mercury, goes retrograde as well. So we have no retrograde break, basically, the first quarter of 2025. Mercury is shorter in a sign, approximately 3 weeks. So what's so fascinating is that, you know, Venus goes retrograde at 10 degrees of Aries, but Mercury goes retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries, so approximately the same degree, and that's March 15th, like I said. So the Mercury retrograde will last until April 7th. So it will, all the retrogrades, because of Venus, will last until April 13th. Before April 13th, planets are not in full power, okay? And what does it mean? Well, Mercury, by the way, is about our mind, right? About our mental situation, our thoughts, our communication, learning, mobility. All of these personal planets going retrograde just means that our character, our personalities, and just our daily lives are slightly on hold. And that obviously there's a very looking back kind of energy to what was and the way you did things, you know, the way you had your goals, such as Mars, the way you thought about things, such as Mercury, but specifically because this is a Venus retrograde video, the way you were about love, you know, were you receiving healthy love? Were you able to value yourself? Were you able to have a healthy relationship with finances? How did that go? So it's looking back, also because a huge part of it is also in Pisces, right? And Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac where everything ends, where everything comes to completion, definitely on a soul level. So it's interesting that this Venus retrograde is interacting with these major changes that happen simultaneously as Venus goes retrograde in the latter part of Pisces, where we have the North Node, where we have Neptune and Saturn. Neptune at the end of March is going to go into Aries, and Saturn at the end of May approximately is going to go into Aries. So it seems that Venus is kind of bringing information into these outer planets, into the consciousness, and kind of paving the way, it seems. Or there are parts of us that we left behind or need to collect before we move on. Because once Neptune moves into Aries and Saturn moves into Aries, even though this will be approximately a good year journey, because they will be going retrograde and then going back into the Aries, but the Aries energy is going to change the way we experience things. It's going to change our behavior. It's going to change how we, what we want and how we go after it. I feel it's a whole new reality, new soul contracts when Neptune and Saturn move into Aries. And is it coincidence that this Venus retrograde is going over these Aries and last parts of Pisces? I don't think so. So what it means, because Venus is about finances, partners, relationships, beauty, possessions, right? Self-worth, values. It means these are huge parts of those topics are changing, are ending. The way we did relationships, the way we did finances, even what we thought was beautiful or worthy is changing. And it's bringing the sauce over into the Saturn journey and into the Neptune journey, I feel. So let's look deeper into this Venus retrograde journey. Let's look at the important dates and what this retrograde seems to be about. First of all, again, Venus is represented by two signs in astrology, and that is Taurus and Libra. So it rules over the second house and the seventh house. Now, second house is generally known as finances, right? Possessions, wealth, ruled by Taurus. It's also your values, what you find important and essential, where generally you earn money from. The seventh house is partnerships, romance, but also business, cooperation with others, one-on-one relationships, the things you share, even like your love language. So second house and seventh house, Taurus and Libra energies are highlighted during such a Venus retrograde, which means that if you have important placements in Libra and Taurus, this Venus retrograde affects you more than the other person, especially if you have an ascendant in Libra, so Libra ascendant or Taurus ascendant, then Venus is your chart ruler, so this Venus retrograde applies to you personally. And of course, if you have anything between 10 degrees of Aries, moving back to 0 degrees of Aries, and then back to 24 degrees of Pisces, so basically between 29 and 24 degrees of Pisces, then of course this Venus retrograde is very relevant for you too. The house between 10 degrees of Aries up into 24 degrees of Pisces is where the topic of that house will be reviewed by you, is where you need reflection. Are there projects you need to tie together? Is there something you need to look at? Is there a person, people you need to reconnect with or end ties with? That topic is under review. So for instance, if it's your 10th house where Venus is going through during this retrograde, then obviously you're reviewing your career, your public image, and because Venus is also about beautification, beauty, how you present yourself, your style, your appearance. This might go under review. You might want to change things, and definitely about your legacy, right, in the 10th house. If Venus is going through your 7th house, this retrograde, then obviously you're looking back at your relationships or how you connected interrelated to other people? Were there toxic traits? Were you over giving? Were you over pleasing? You know, that's what you're looking at. If it's the fifth house, maybe there were romantic relationships where your self-worth was too low, where, you know, you might have more values regarding romance and sexuality and sensuality, because sensuality is actually also something that Venus rules over, lust, eroticism. But when Venus goes retrograde between March 2nd until April 13th, now these Venusian topics such as finances and relationships and beauty and even self-esteem are under a loop, and they are not functioning in its fullest power, which means these topics should be reviewed, but should not necessarily be taken action upon. What does that mean? When Venus goes retrograde, traditionally in astrology, this is not the time to change your appearance. Because if you have a haircut suddenly that's different, like suddenly you want a ponytail, or what is it called, a fringe, you know, whatever, a change in color or something in your hair, the chances that you will like it are very low when Venus goes retrograde, because you don't have that natural eye for beauty when Venus is in its full power, okay? So also definitely not a time to do plastic surgery or any invasive treatments to your appearance, to your skin, even outfits, you know. You should stick to what you know. Of course, this is very general and classic astrology, which is under review as well. But I'm just telling you how it is, and then it's up to you, right, what you do with the information. So if you're not happy with that new haircut, then, well, you know why. So that's a point of worry. Don't want to do drastic changes. You don't want to do things you didn't do before. Venus is also about art and interior decoration. So major changes to your house, to how your house looks, is also not a good idea. Because Venus is about finances, this is also not a good time for big purchases, you know, expensive buys, because you might not be happy with what you bought when Venus goes direct, and also you might see that you pay too much and that there will be a bargain when Venus goes direct again. So there's a thing with prices being off when Venus goes retrograde, right? You just don't have a great insight, also not in finances. So maybe new investments, new big investments are also kind of a no-no, but it's up to you, right? I'm not here to give you business advice either, but it's just the astrology view, especially classic astrology view of what Venus retrograde is about, the do's and don'ts, right? Because Venus is about relationships, again, in classic astrology, this is generally not considered a good time to start new relationships, because it won't last when Venus goes retrograde, when, you know, during a retrograde, whatever starts during a retrograde doesn't last, basically. That goes also for a Mercury retrograde and also for a Mars retrograde. So, you know, lay low perhaps on your dating plans, you know, unless it's okay with you that it doesn't last very long. Also, that generally Venus retrograde is not a good time to get married as well, okay? Because the 7th house is about marriage and contracts, and Venus is going retrograde, so you also don't have a great eye for, you know, partnership. And like I said, it's about eroticism and lust as well, and romance. So when Venus is retrograde, that is lacking, okay? I guess it's a good time for like relationship therapy if you're looking to heal how you're behaving in relationships. It's a great moment for self therapy, anything that enhances your own self-esteem. It's a good time to work about your relationship with finances. Um, for instance, even something like EFT, which is a tapping on the meridians, right? You can really change your relationship with money, so that you have a healthier, energetic match with that topic. And it's a good time to think about what your love language is, what turns you on, what are you looking for in a romantic partner, as well as your purchasing power. It's related to your notion about wealth and what kind of values you have and hold up to, right? Basically, in essence, how do you love? How do you love yourself? How do you love these Venusian topics? And how are you about loving someone else? An intimate relationship. But I would say a huge attention is also definitely on finances. So keep an eye on that, because it's also, once it goes into Pisces back, so it goes, the backwards movement is called an ingress back into Pisces during its retrograde, which occurs March 27th. But we will get to that. We will get to all the details, because we are astrology geeks over here. We're going to get into the nitty gritty, right? So March 27th, when Venus goes back into Pisces because of its retrograde, it's meeting that North Node, it's meeting that Neptune, it's meeting Saturn, right? And these are all at the end of Pisces, 29 degrees, the anuretic degree, the very last degree of the zodiac sign, of the zodiac chart, the zodiac wheel. So, if Venus is dancing there, what does that mean for our finances? What does it mean for our relationships? It seems we're undergoing massive endings and completions, because we have to start a new journey with massive upgrades regarding our notion on love, regarding our notion on finances, because it now is based on strong values and a greater understanding of worth, right? Self-worth. What are you worthy of? What is worthy to you? What is important? What is essential? What feels good? And that's going to determine, I think, a new Venusian story once it goes direct.
So pull out your diary or planner and track along.
Now let's get into the dates, the details and dates. The Venus retrograde pre-shadow period, is a period when it's kind of slowing down, it's losing its energetic power. So the Venusian topics are slowing down and are losing momentum, are losing importance, basically. And that occurs January 28th. So strictly speaking, from January 28th on of 2025, you should be careful about these Venusian topics, right? No sudden changes in your looks, no sudden changes in your finances, no abrupt decisions in your relationships, or at least not really starting anything new regarding these topics, right? It's about going to the old so that you can start a very healthy new. My experience with Mercury retrogrades, because Mercury retrogrades tend to occur approximately 3 times a year, so we're very, if you're slightly sensitive, you're very aware of the mercurial retrogrades. And in my experience, the pre-shadow in Mercury retrogrades is very strong. But Mercury is the closest planet to us. The Venus energy, I'm not that sure about, because Venus is a retrograde that takes place every 1.5 years. So, it takes some time to quite understand the Venusian energy. I'm not sure how strong the Venus pre-shadow period is, but you should feel into it. If by January 28th of this year you feel a shift regarding these Venusian topics, you feel that, your one-on-one relationships are going a bit off, like there's something strange, you're not understanding other people that well anymore, or people from the past are popping up, then you know that for you personally, the pre-shadow is strong, okay? But the actual retrograde starts March 2nd. So see if anything in February already indicates to you that Venus is losing its power. You have to see for yourself. Once Venus goes retrograde March 2nd, that occurs at 10 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries, which is the first decan of Aries, right? Which is the fresh start, the beginning of everything, the beginning of life, the spark, the energy, the motivation. Means we're also kind of losing a bit of power in that.
Because Venus goes retrograde March 2nd, this is also the birth chart for the Venus retrograde energy. So what we see right away is that Venus is making a sextile to Jupiter in Gemini at 12 degrees. This means that there is a larger than life experience to the Venus retrograde. It's a very communicative, passionate, energetic, quick energy that surrounds the Venus retrograde, and a momentum for tremendous expansion and healing. Mental health will be high on our list of to-dos, and also just a great desire to learn, to expand, to gain skills, and educate ourselves. Venus is also close by to the moon, and that's interesting because later this month in March, she's going to meet the moon again at the end of Pisces because of a retrograde. So there is a moon conjunct Venus situation that plays clearly in the Venus retrograde energy. Now, this just means that the Venus retrograde is going to affect many people. And that's also because of the end of Pisces is so busy this year during her retrograde. So clearly something is ending, and that might affect many people, such as financial changes or whatever else Venus can represent. But collectively, because that's what the moon is about, it's likely that that is the case, or something that affects just a lot of people. Other than that, there is a Sun square Jupiter at the beginning of her retrograde. That's slightly unfortunate because that diminishes the expansive energy that she herself has with Jupiter. The Sun square Jupiter is holding the expansiveness a little back. It's trying to bring, I think both energies are very lacking focus, and the square just indicates that we need to pull our attention together. This is not a time for procrastination, not a time for delusions, not a time for grandiosity or like overindulgence or hedonism or dangerous escapism, and we just need a lot of healing that the end of Pisces will see to, as well as this retrograde.
So the retrograde lasts until April 13th, remember, and that is at 24 degrees and 38 minutes of Pisces.
What is so strange that April 13th, when Venus goes direct, is the same day that we have a full moon in Libra occurring at 23 degrees, that this Venus rules. So she rules over that lunation when she goes direct, right on the same day. She makes a quincunx, a very uneasy relationship to the moon. But whereas this lunation is T-squaring Mars in Crab, Venus is actually trining the Mars in Crab. So she is lightening the tension. And I think it's because now, after 40 days, she learned so much in the retrograde, meaning we learned so much about the end of Pisces and the beginning of Aries, that we can now really help the tension in this lunation, because we healed so much, because we learned so much, and we bring that into this lunation, we bring that into the Mars energy as well. So that is hopeful.
The post-shadow period is when, it's charging up again. It's becoming more stronger in its energy. It's speeding up. So the post-shadow period of Venus lasts until May 16th. But again, like the Mercury retrogrades, I don't feel a strong post-shadow period. But statistically there is one. Okay, we know that because of the degrees. So take it into account. If you're a Venus ruled chart, like I said, if you're a Taurus ascendant or Libra ascendant, I think this is more sensitive for you. But definitely, check in with the pre-shadow. I'm not that sure, but definitely the Venus retrograde is something we will strongly feel, because it's the feminine aspect of life. It's very close to us, especially, I guess, if you're a woman, but femininity is in every gender, right? Because money is something that everybody is involved with. Self-worth is something we all need to upgrade, and of course loving relationships is, I think, what most people are interested in, or at least loving connections, which does not necessarily have to be a romantic relationship. But this is also, like I said, about business and clientelism, right? Your clients, or your therapist, your anyone that you share anything with or cooperate anything with. That's where this Venus is about as well. So during that retrograde period, it's important to know that Venus ingresses, like I said, goes back into Pisces in its retrograde period March 27th, because then the energy is going to change, from Aries to Pisces. And April 30th is when, of course, Venus is long direct, because it goes direct April 13th, but it's back into Aries again. So that's a notable shift again, where, the energy is changing. And, this is really important, that shift. It's really important that March 27th date, when Venus goes back into Pisces in its retrograde, because there's a lot going on at the end of March, okay? We're gonna see Neptune moving to Aries. We're gonna see a solar eclipse happening, and we're gonna see Venus at 29 degrees together with the moon. So there's a lot going on around those 29 days with the Venus energy. So we're gonna look into that. Let's take it chronologically. January 28th is when the pre-shadow of Venus starts. Then February 1st, Venus meets Neptune for the first time at 27 degrees and 59 minutes of Pisces. So this is a very romantic day. This is a very fantastic energy. This is, you know, a magical kiss. This is just feeling dreamy all day and feeling like everything is possible, and very huge creative impulses February 1st. Now, that's also the day, same day, that Venus meets with the North Node, and that ignites some purpose, you know, fate, a divine spark occurring around 28 degrees of Pisces. February 2nd, Venus moves into Aries. Like I said, it's very energetic, it's very erotic, it's very exploring your desires, your needs, um, putting yourself slightly more forward than normal. So, trying to find out how you prioritize yourself. This is where Venus takes more charge and is stepping into her leadership, and she wants to be noticed. And it's all about discovering your self esteem, your identity, your sexuality, your beauty, your body, your interests, your motivations, your lust, and your goals, really. And there's an excitement to complete, to do, to receive, to be open. But it's slightly a masculine way of femininity. So it's a mix between receiving but also doing and going after. So, and that the I think the play of those two different energies is a very sparkly Venus in Aries. Now, March 2nd is when Venus retrograde starts at 10 degrees of Aries. Then we have a cazimi, which means that the Sun and Venus meet each other at 2 degrees of Aries, occurring March 23rd. Now we come into that very important March 27th date, and that's when first Venus retrograde meets Neptune again. Because she's retrograde. So that occurs at 29 degrees and 53 minutes of Pisces. And again, March 27th seems to be a very romantic day, very dreamy again, right? Creative. You know, you might have more visions, imagination of the kind of love you want, the kind of love you're worthy of. And it might be, you know, because Venus is retrograde, an opportunity to leave behind the fantasies, the illusions, deceit you had about love, so that you can upgrade your notion and move into, you know, a higher love, unconditional love, perhaps divine love that you might feel into as well. Then March 28th, the day after, Venus meets the moon at 29 degrees. I think this is quite meaningful. This is the day before the solar eclipse. So by the 27th of March, Venus is in a very important portal of energy. She's strongly involved. And that means that whatever's going on in March is very Venusian energy as well, which is finances, relationships, beauty, and worthiness, self-worth, and anything valuable in our world, like possessions and anything luxurious, expensive, right? It's interesting that they
30th.
meet the moon and Venus on March. That is also a very dreamy energy, and because it occurs at 29 degrees of Pisces, which is a very critical degree, the moon represents the people, you know, civilizations. This could be where we feel some kind of ending theme, especially to finances. So when Venus goes retrograde, and because it ingresses back into Pisces at the end of March, we might experience financial difficulties. Okay. Now, the next day, March 29th, is when we have a solar eclipse at 8 degrees of Aries, and that's going to be big because an eclipse always is. So that's going to shake us awake, awakenings, enlightenment, insights, massive changes, especially if you have anything around 8 degrees of Aries. And remember, that degree point is approximately where the Venus retrograde starts and the Mercury retrograde starts. So apparently that around 8 degrees of Aries is a very important point. So if you have anything yourself there, but also perhaps around 8 degrees of Libra, and even 8 degrees of Capricorn and the crab are involved, I might get a huge push from the cosmos with this solar eclipse. It should be a new story. And what a new grand story it should be, because the next day after that one, March 30th, is when Neptune moves into Aries. And so we are starting a new 165-year journey of Neptune. Neptune in Aries is a whole new story. Interesting and to know, now that I mentioned this, is that Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, okay? Venus is the lower octave. They have similar expressions, but one is just lower and I should say more mundane, so more about daily realities. That's Venus. And then Neptune is the higher octave, so higher expressions and kind of almost out of this world, otherworldly, higher notions of kind of the same things, such as Venus is about love, right? Relationships, the partnerships, the mundane, your daily life and the interactions with someone else, and the problems that you encounter with that, of how to relate and how to have a healthy relationship. And then Neptune is also about love, but it's the highest expression of love. So it's about unconditional love. It's about the divine love. It's about forgiveness, about healing. By healing your love language, by healing the way you connect to people and your trauma is how you can move into more healthier relationships, right? So the Venus element really needs the Neptune element. But of course, Neptune is also about addictions and escapism and illusions and complete fantasies, untruths. So you should also be careful with the Neptune energy. But it's interesting that they interact, right? And so the lower and higher expression of love, of art, of beauty by Neptune and Venus is being reworked here. So March 30th is an important day when the higher expression of love, higher expression of art, higher expression of beauty, Neptune starts a new cycle. And together with a month later, May, when Saturn moves into Aries as well, I feel we are kickstarting a complete new reality, new karma, new journey. And Venus is involved, clearly, you know. And we enter April, and 1st of April, this Venus retrograde meets the North Node again, and Mercury is also very close by at 27 degrees of Pisces. Now remember, that's a very fated energy, so you might come into some soul realizations, maybe some dreams that will help you to see what kind of journey you need to go on and what kind of journey you need to move away from. April 7th is another very important day when Venus retrograde meeting Saturn is just a huge checking in point. It occurs at 25 degrees of Pisces, and you know, there is more maturity, more realism, more discipline about these Venusian topics, and it's kind of kicking our butt a little bit about these Venus things so that we mature, in our self-esteem, that we mature in our understanding of beauty, that we mature in our relationships, in our language of love. that we are able to hold more responsibility for ourselves and towards a partner in a relationship. So it's basically about growing up, you know, and you might get a lot of epiphanies about, have you grown up? Do you need some growing up to do? Are there some growing pains and growing grief that this Venus retrograde will move through? And so basically you might move through. Now, April 13th, Venus goes direct at 10 degrees of Aries. Venus goes direct at 24 degrees of Pisces. Not necessarily about Venus, but it is interesting that the 21st of April is when the North Node and Saturn meet at 26 degrees of Pisces. And this is again that very fated karmic energy that is changing our journey and is bringing soul insights to how we live our life here on Earth. We might really learn a lot of important skills thanks to Saturn. It's again that growing up energy, but now we're growing up in our soul evolution. And it's related, I think, to that new karma when Saturn goes into Aries. April 24th is when the North Node meets with Venus again. This is interesting because, 3 days ago, the same North Node met with Saturn. So got information about maturity, about karma, and about walking a new path, right? And now it's meeting with Venus again, and I believe for the third time because of the retrograde. So now Venus is direct and receives again information from the North Node. So upgrading her new journey, and that is also very fated energy, very kind of new karma to the Venusian area of your life. April 25th, Saturn and Venus meet again at 27 degrees, again for the third time as well. And now she is much more mature and they're understanding each other. And so we will have much more mature sense of how to do our finances, how to feel worthy of money, because we have matured our emotional self, which is related to how we feel about ourselves, how we feel worthy, right? And that's going to change our relationship with money, as well as relationships, of course. So there is also great maturity that Venus is undergoing at the beginning of 2025. So us, right? Maturity regarding our finances, regarding how we look. Slightly, the way we look might be slightly more conservative because of Saturn. The need to be also conservative with our finances, and relationship view is going to change, because we will get more seriousness, focus from Saturn, and we will understand that love is a higher devotion, that we're looking for a higher expression of love. It's because of this going on at the end of Pisces, right? Because of all that Piscean energy being amplified by Neptune, by the North Node, and this retrograde. So a slight note, maybe, April 27th, we have a new moon in Taurus at 7 degrees, and Taurus is something Venus rules, right? So now she can really show herself the new skills that we have learned during Venus retrograde. We can really implement by April 27th during the new moon in Taurus occurring at 7 degrees. April 30th, Venus is again in Aries, right? She's ready to start a whole new journey of 1.5 years. And it's sparking all that she learned, not just from the Venus retrograde, but from all of that Pisces and energy ending and giving massive insights and upgrades, right? So we're feeling much more mature. We're feeling much more focused. We feel much more healed and a healthier understanding of love, right? So this whole new journey is going to be very, very interesting. Of course, then she meets Neptune, who is at the beginning of Aries, May 2nd. And so May 16th, the post-shadow period of Venus retrograde is over as well. She's now at 10 degrees of Aries. By May 25th, Saturn is going to move into Aries, where Venus seems to have paved the way for Saturn. Now, because Saturn is about karma and can be very heavy lessons, it seems that Venus retrograde is also kind of easing, because Venus is about femininity and about smoothness and comfort and feel good and beautiful. It's kind of literally paving the way with like softness and clouds so that Saturn can ease into Aries, because generally the move from Pisces to Aries can be a bumpy ride, maybe, because it's like going from the high frequency dreamy world, bam, back into harsh reality in this earthly realm. So it seems that this Venus retrograde also helps Saturn that moves into Aries May 25th. And so that somehow it seems like, you know, Venus is being a little bit of a messenger, going back and forth around this Saturn journey, that it seems to be helping Saturn smooth out its toughness. And I really do believe that it's a new timeline when Neptune and Saturn are in Aries. So basically by May 25th, when Saturn is in Aries, this is new timelines, new experiences. And Venus seems to have played a high role in this by helping us to understand what we love, what we find important, what is essential. You know, Venus is also ruling about Taurus, right? Which is survival, which is your basic needs, like food, like shelter, comforts, your loved ones, you know, feeling good, safety, security. These are Taurian themes as well. So maybe when Venus goes retrograde between, you know, March and April, we might also feel a bit of a destabilization regarding this comfort, basic needs, survival, and that at the same time, where we might feel destabilized, also because there is a eclipse at Pisces. There's an eclipse March 14th, a total lunar eclipse around 24 degrees of Virgo, which into plays, of course, with this whole stellium in Pisces, including Venus retrograde. So it's a destabilizing period because of the eclipse season in March as well, which coincides with this Venus retrograde, right? So there's a lot going on, not just Neptune at the end tail of Pisces moving into Aries, not just Saturn doing the same at the end of Pisces moving into Aries, not just the North Node that's moving into Pisces and so touching Venus retrograde as well. But at the same time, this is also when we have our first eclipse season in March, right? An eclipse at March 14th and an eclipse and at March 29th. There is some destabilization because of that, because of the eclipses and a Venus retrograde, mind you, simultaneously a Mercury retrograde as well. But it's also seemingly, because it intertwines with that new journey into Aries, is that Venus is also a helper, an ease, you know, brings ease to these changes, to the end of things, the destabilization part, as well as the start of a new birth. So she's giving, you know, the good hormones, the oxytocin, the serotonin, so that it makes us a little bit easier on this road of massive changes, okay? From March on, I don't know what's going to happen, but it might be a new reality. And Venus seems to be a big player in this. What do you think after hearing all of this? What is your opinion on Venus, and what do you think it's going to mean that she's intertwined with this eclipse energy, as well as this massive transformation of Pisces into Aries. Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. I do believe Venus is going to help us support us in this journey. So hope it brings you comfort and safety and feel goodness on this massive, massive change. Happy Venus retrograde!